Thorpe, a highly sought-after keynote speaker. Devin is a highly accomplished man and calls himself a champion for social good, and indeed he is. Traveling to developing countries. If I remember, Devin, was it Pakistan? Pakistan next month, Dominican Republic just last week, and others. He's doing this to help solve some of the world's biggest problems. Really thinking big and doing a lot of awesome work. In the past, he was the managing director for Thorpe Capital Group, a managing director at UStar, and then a CFO for Mona V. He is an author of 5 books and contributor at Forbes, and he is giving some of these books away immediately after his presentation. So we're going to have, you can put your cards in a little fishbowl out there, and we're going to have a little raffle to give some of those away right after he finishes his presentation. So he's going to address us today for about 30 minutes. Please now welcome Devin Thorpe.
Bryce, thank you very much. It's an honor, really, to be included in this conference. Can anybody see me if I stand down here? You in the front row, you can see me. In the back row, do you have any idea that I'm here? I saw someone in the back row nod her head. I'm going to try and stay down here. If it becomes a problem, raise your hand and tell me to hop up and down. Thank you. So yesterday, my wife had a very minor surgery, throat surgery, and she ended up with a sore throat as a result of this, as you might expect. She's fine. But as I was getting her some throat lozenges yesterday, right after her surgery, it occurred to me I had a little tickle in my throat, and I took a throat lozenge. I thought it was just psychosomatic. It turns out I have come down with a very nasty cold, so that my wife and I now have comparably sore throats. So if I stop talking at some point during my presentation, I apologize, but it may just run out of juice, or if you see me eating candy or something, please forgive me. Let me tell you a little bit about this. Matt Dalio wanted to create a computer for the next 1 billion people who are about to buy their first computers. These are relatively poor people living on less than $10 a day, and he recognized that they were not going to be buying $300, $500, let alone $2,000 computers. And so he spent 2 years traveling around the world, meeting with his prospective customers to understand what they wanted. And his first big insight was they didn't want the cheapest computer he could make. They wanted the best computer they could afford, which was a very different thing. And then one of the other new things that he learned was that all of his prospective customers already had a television. They didn't need a computer monitor. So this is what he created. This is the Endless Computer. It has its own proprietary operating system, and it sells for $168. And it has just a USB port to connect it to a television monitor. He launched this for sale to the world on Kickstarter, raised $176,538, and is changing the world in the bargain. Very exciting. So this is, I think, a great example of using crowdfunding to impact the world. Now, before we go on, I want to just tell you a little bit about me. A few years ago, 1976. How many of you were even alive in 1976? Go ahead. I was, so you can confess. There are a few of you here in the room who were. I'm glad to see that. But the Teton Dam failed in 1976. The very first time the dam was filled, the reservoir was filled, it failed. And it flooded the town of Rexburg, Idaho, damaged or destroyed about 80% of the structures there. And people from all around the West went to visit the Teton area, the Rexburg area, to help people dig the muck and mud out of basements. And my father came to me one week that summer and said, on Saturday, I'm going up to Rexburg. Do you want to come? I thought digging muck and mud sounded like a good time. I said, sure. And so we did. I got on a bus about 2 a.m., rode until dawn. I remember being so excited on that whole bus ride up to Rexburg. We worked all day, got back on the bus at dark. I passed out immediately, don't remember anything about the ride home. So we were gone about 24 hours. And it turned out to be really one of a life-changing experience for me. You see the little girl in the foreground in this picture? That's me. You can tell that shovel was awfully big compared to me that day. I probably didn't do any real good, but I sure felt like I had done some good. I felt like I had made a difference, and I vowed that I would never miss an opportunity to do good. Well, I went on to have a very successful finance career, and I did some good, but I missed a lot of opportunities to do good. And when I got fired from this great job that I had 5 years ago as the CFO of a global food and beverage company, I decided to sort of channel that enthusiasm of my youth and focus on a career where I could do more good. And so I'm a journalist, writing and speaking about people who are doing good and solving problems. So I've sort of remade my career, and I volunteer whenever I can, probably still not as much. I'm still missing opportunities for good. In this context, though, I've been focusing a little bit on crowdfunding's impact on the world, and I think it is huge. Inherently, it is huge. Inherently, it is empowering to people who are somewhat disenfranchised. Whether we're talking about people who live in Vernal, Utah, because they have no access to traditional capital sources, or whether we are talking about women or minorities, crowdfunding helps to break down barriers that have been erected that prevent us from accessing capital. So I'm very excited about it. There are three types of capital that I distinguish in the crowdfunding world. One is donations, which I see as being a little bit different from rewards, right? Because typically with donations, we don't get anything. Then rewards, which we've talked a lot about this morning, and then equity, which we'll be talking about this afternoon. And when we say equity, I try to use the term investment crowdfunding more often, because oftentimes we're not talking about equity, we're talking about debt, but it works in a similar way. You get your money back. What you're buying is not a cool thing, it is a return on your investment. Now let's talk a little bit about the potential of crowdfunding. First off, the largest crowdfunding campaign I've ever heard of in any type was an equity crowdfunding campaign to build a skyscraper in Bogota, Colombia. Now who'd have thunk, right, that would be the record setter, but they raised $200 million for a skyscraper in Bogota. $13 million, as an example, is one of the all-time biggest, if not the very biggest, rewards campaign. You probably talked about that this morning, the Coolest Cooler. And about $5 million plus and growing, ongoing, is what the Habitat for Humanity has raised using crowdfunding. So there are big dollars at stake through crowdfunding. Now, I want to just put that in even more context, because when we talk about those campaigns, it makes really big successes seem easy, and it makes it feel like we should expect more than we do. In the UK, the average equity crowdfunding campaign is about $100,000. Not a whole lot of money. So when we talk about crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, I want you to realize that's a win, right? If you can raise $100,000, that's a win. And there are strategies that ordinary people, not extraordinary people, ordinary people can use to raise money like that. Rewards campaigns average only $4,000 or $5,000. We talk about Coolest Cooler and it's $13 million because it's an exception, because it's exciting. That's not average. That's not typical. You probably won't raise $13 million on your crowdfunding campaign. And a lot of them don't raise any money at all. So I just want to make sure that we have that as a quick reference, a quick understanding. Now I want to make sure too, and I'm sure there's been discussion about this already today, but just to remind you, The crowd, I like to say, it's almost as difficult to find as Sasquatch. It really doesn't exist. The crowd is your network. It's your friends. It isn't some magical group of people sitting at their computers waiting to give you money. It is your friends, your family. That's where it starts. Now, a few people, the average campaign probably raises 75% of its money from people that the founders of the company or the people who are raising the money know, and 25% comes from people outside of their immediate circle, their friends' friends and strangers who are attracted to the project for whatever reason. A few campaigns, a relative few, reverse that statistic and get about 25% of their money from people close in, and then their campaigns are amplified, and they get maybe 75% of their money from outside their networks. And that's where I want you to be thinking about how to get into that group so that your inner circle becomes 25% and 75% can come outside. That's not a $13 million round, right? You know, that's $30,000. And we'll talk about that. In fact, this is a perfect example. Jennifer was losing her mother to cancer. She has since lost her mother to cancer. And she was just at a loss as to how to comfort her mother when her mother came down with cancer because she was living 1,200 miles away. So she sent her mother a pair of sock monkeys that were sort of regifted, just as a way to say, Mom, I love you, I'm there for you. And her mother just loved the sock monkeys. And so she would take the sock monkeys to chemo every time she went to get her chemo. And it really created a bond. And so Jennifer decided that she was going to create a company that would sell sock monkeys. She called them Sock Monkeys Against Cancer, Smack Monkeys. And she began work on designing them and sourcing them. And she built a community online around this. And then she did a crowdfunding campaign. And her idea was that whenever anyone in the world gets cancer, their friends and family should immediately think, what I need to do is buy a sock monkey to give to my loved one with cancer. Now, I will tell you, honest and true, that struck me as absurd. But it resonated with enough people that she raised $35,000 to kick this off. So it tells you, I think, that your idea doesn't have to be universally perceived as brilliant. If you execute well, you can raise tens of thousands of dollars through crowdfunding for an idea. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to focus on, and you've probably heard enough about this, but I will just take 1 minute to reinforce the importance of establishing trust. Americans tend to be very trusting, and Utahns, I think, are even more trusting than most Americans. I think that's a good thing. But as a crowdfunder, I don't want you to assume trust. I want you to earn trust so that you can win over the skeptics at the edges and the periphery of your network. So always use your own real name whenever you're doing anything in social media, and connect your accounts using your real name to your crowdfunding campaign. Make sure that there's that transparent connection so people really know that you are a real person. Because if they know you are a real person and how to find you, then they know you probably aren't going to lie and cheat them, right? The second thing you need to then do is establish credibility with respect to your ability to execute. And so you want to make sure that in your crowdfunding campaign and documents and communications that you establish your credibility so that you are viewed as someone who can execute. Because most of the failures, the vast majority of failures in crowdfunding are the second kind of trust kind of failures, right? They weren't that people took the money with bad intentions. It's they took the money and were incompetent fools and were unable to do what they had promised that they would do, and so either delivered crap, delivered it years late, or didn't deliver at all. Now, building a team, if you are doing a cause-oriented campaign, this is really the critical thing. The difference between being able to raise $5,000 and being able to raise $30,000, in my experience, comes down principally to teamwork. Because one person can only raise about $5,000 from his or her own network. So if you want to go much past that, you've got to have a team of people who are each individually tapping into their own networks, each of which will be somewhat independent and therefore allow you to raise tens of thousands of dollars. There are three levels of people I tend to think about in your team. And the first two are the most important, but the first group is your partners. The partners are the people that are, in fact, your business partners. They're people who have the same financial interest in your project that you have, or at least a very similar one. If you are a solopreneur, right, you're on your own as an entrepreneur, then you may not have any partners. So then in either case, then the next tier down would be your champions or your fanatics. And these are people who love you and love what you're doing. If you're running a nonprofit, these may be people who serve on your board. These may be people that volunteer with you regularly. But these are people who you know and who understand what you're doing, and you lasso them into the group and you bring them in to help you crowdfund. The distinction here is they're probably not paid by your nonprofit. They're not partners. They don't own anything. They're doing this because they love what you do. The third tier is, I call them boosters, and these are people that are like the fanatics or the champions, but you didn't think of them in time. And after you start your campaign, they sort of volunteer and spring up, and you want to recruit them in and treat them like the champions. Now, I want to help you assess your campaign. Now, this assessment really has some relevance to people who are not doing a cause-oriented campaign. But if you are thinking about something that has a cause, that has some social purpose, this really is, I think, a scoring rubric that will help you think about your campaign. Some of these things you can change. Some of these things are marketing. They're not inherent in your cause or even in your campaign. Some of them are inherent, and you can't change them. You just have to assess them. But let's go through them one at a time. The face of your campaign. Now, this is something clearly that can change. You choose the person or critter that is the face of your campaign. I want to be very clear here. The most important thing is for you to understand the face of your campaign can't be a gadget. Even if you are selling primarily a gadget, you need to put a face behind, around, or in front of the gadget so that people begin to see the person that would be affected by the gadget. Now, you may, as the owner, as the entrepreneur, as the leader of the cause, you may be the face of the campaign. Oftentimes, that is a good idea. If you're doing something charitable for someone else, it may make sense to make one of the people you serve the face of the campaign if it wouldn't be exploitative to them. But you want to have someone attractive, if possible, someone that really personifies the project in some way, shape, or form. So give yourself a score of 1 to 5 points on face as you think about that. Now, urgency is the next one. And all of us, raise your hand if you don't know anyone that has ever had cancer. Raise it high. Okay, I saw 2 hands go up. 2 people have never known anyone with cancer. I didn't think there were 2 people in the world, but okay, we have 2 people in the room. Everyone else knows someone who's been impacted by cancer. Here's the challenge with cancer. We tend to think about cancer as something that is part of the human experience, part of the human condition. It will never change. It will always be there, and there's nothing we can do about it. that tends to remove or reduce its urgency, right? So if you're raising money for something like cancer, it might be homelessness, it might be all kinds of things that we view as being permanent parts of our community, our condition. It's a challenge. On the other hand, if you're raising money right after the Boston bombing, if you're raising money right after the Nepal earthquake or the Haiti earthquake probably was the best example ever of crowdfunding success. I mean, my heavens, tens of millions of dollars poured in the days after from essentially crowdfunding activities. That gives you natural urgency. So think about how urgent your campaign is with, I hate to say it, cancer, the American Cancer Society on one end of the extreme, and the Boston bombing perhaps, that instantaneous, immediate need for money on the other. And score it on 5 points for your own campaign. Then politics. I hate to raise this, but there are some things that are not very unifying. Cancer tends to be pretty unifying because all but 2 of us know someone who has had cancer. So we can all relate to it. So we're all interested in solving cancer as a problem in our community. On the other hand, in this very room, I am confident that there are people who have deep disagreements about marriage equality. Deep disagreements on the way transgendered people should be treated in our communities, and deep disagreements on abortion. Now, I don't want to talk about those issues, but you can see that you might be very passionate about something about which there is not universal agreement. Now, there are some shades in there in between. For instance, I would say breast cancer, if you went back 10 years ago, I would say breast cancer would have been one of those most unifying causes out there. But what's happened over the last 10 years is that breast cancer has become so successful in its fundraising and its branding that people with other kinds of cancers have become quite literally jealous of the breast cancer success. And so there is, even within that community, there are tiers, right? So breast cancer can be a little bit divisive in its approach. So that's not a 0, it's not a 2, but it's probably not a 5 anymore. So think about those things as you're thinking about your campaign. Now, geography. Geography is an interesting one. If your project, the one that you're crowdfunding for, has a location, and it matches up with where you are and where the money will come from, that's sort of the perfect trifecta, right? Because you're then asking the people you know to fund something that is going on right in your own community. Now, Melanie and I were talking just a few minutes ago. She wants to raise money for helping to restore natural reefs that are suffering terribly due to climate change and other related reasons. Now, if she's trying to raise money in Utah for protecting reefs, we don't have a lot of reefs in Utah. So it's not something we relate to as well. So that is an example of how removing something from us makes it just a little bit more difficult. The example I like to use is if I were to find a mother and her 3 children, and let's just say the mother has AIDS and she doesn't have a job and she's living in a dung hut down by the Jordan River. If I discovered that circumstance and I told you about it, I'm confident that in the city of Salt Lake City, in the community we are living in, if I told you about that situation, that woman and her children would not spend one more night in that dung hut. She would have care, feeding, food, a place to live. It would be taken care of in this community right now today. We would not accept that. And yet, there are millions, maybe tens of millions of women with their children living in exactly that circumstance in Africa, and we right here in Salt Lake City know about it. It's not that we didn't know that they existed, we know. We know they're there, and we don't do anything about it because it's not our problem. So, I want you to be thoughtful about geography. So think about how closely related to your own community, the community where you'll raise the money, is to that problem. And then finally, I want you to think about community of interest, right? This is one, and I've developed my thinking a little bit around this over time. Initially, I thought it was only important that there be a community, right? And then I had an experience with a Methodist church. There's a wonderful Methodist church downtown Salt Lake, the First Methodist Church down there. And they have the oldest organ in Utah. And it is a magnificent organ, but it's really fallen into disrepair, or had fallen into disrepair. And they were desperately trying to raise money. I scored them very high on this idea of there being a community. There are millions of Methodists in the country. And I thought, well, surely the Methodists around the country will rally around to help restore the organ in Salt Lake City that is, in many ways, more historic and more important than the Tabernacle organ 3 blocks away. What I found was they didn't have any way to communicate effectively with the Methodist community, the broader Methodist community. They didn't have a natural channel of communication. And so they didn't raise any money from Methodists around the country. It was really kind of sad. So I've learned you've got to have, not only does there have to be a community, you actually have to know how to access it. So score yourself on that, 5 points. Now, a project or event. This is kind of a cheat category. We talked about urgency. If you create a project or an event, we're going to build a school in Guatemala. We're going to do a 5K on July 4th. By creating a specific project that can't happen until the money is raised, or you create an event which happens on a specific date, you create urgency, a natural urgency, because the event or the project now becomes central to your campaign, and it drives people to act now, because they have to act now in order to participate in a meaningful way. So Sarah here, for instance, raised money to join me on a trip to Nepal last year. She raised, I think, $6,000 to spend a month in Nepal doing service. I wish I had time to tell you the story of the world's longest water slide, but I don't. I'm sorry. So give yourself a score. Rate yourself 5 points on each of those areas. So there were 6 areas, 5 points each. That would be a potential of 30 points, right? So if you have 25 points or more, I think it's quite likely that your campaign could go beyond your own network in a fairly meaningful way. So you could end up getting 4 times as much as your own network might provide. So if you've got 5 people on your team, that might mean you could raise $25,000 from your networks, but you might be able to raise 4 times that much, or $100,000 if you have, because you have a really high score. On the other hand, if you have 15 points or fewer, you are likely constrained to the people you know. The people you know and love you will give you money, but you probably haven't got a message that will resonate beyond and that will be readily shareable. Now, this doesn't come from a lot of data. It comes from my analyzing anecdotal and looking at data anecdotally. So going viral, going way beyond. And when I talk about going viral, I don't mean raising $30,000. I'm talking about those campaigns that raise millions upon millions of dollars. That really is usually a function of a lot of things: professional PR, celebrity involvement, marketing budget. I really don't know how to create that. There are people here who do, I think, have some expertise in creating those kinds of things. For causes, some of those tactics don't work very well. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. There are lots of platforms and lots of things to think through. Let me just rush through here a couple of key points. Just remember that the money does not come from the platform. you go to Indiegogo, Indiegogo is not giving you money, and there are not nearly enough people surfing Indiegogo looking for things to give money to in order for you to get a meaningful amount of money from the Indiegogo community. You're going to get, wherever platform you use, if you use a small platform, there aren't many people there. If you use a large platform, there are lots of campaigns you're competing with. There is no simple way. There is no, if you build it, they will come. Just remember that. It takes a tremendous amount of work to run a campaign. And the key is to organize your team. We talked about the partners, your fanatics, and your boosters. You need to train those fanatics and those boosters really from the get-go. Let me tell you I need to just tell you one last story. Boy, there's so much stuff I wanted to share. I get going on some of these things. I get too excited. I apologize. Let me tell you a little bit about this record-setting campaign as a conclusion. So about 2 years ago, I had Scott Brusa on my show. I didn't realize that his wife actually came up with the idea to put solar panels in the roads. Now, he initially dismissed her idea. He told her it was crazy to put solar panels in the roads because the cars would crush the solar panels. But then he got thinking about it. The idea started to stew in his mind, and he realized that if you put a really thick piece of glass over the solar panel, a car could drive over it. In fact, a truck could drive over it, and it would survive. And then he got thinking about if you had glass there and you had electricity there, you could put lights there. You could heat the roadway so that you didn't ever need to clear the snow off of it. Suddenly, this was a very exciting idea. And he went out, he got an SBIR grant, started working on it, and he was making some projects. I think a lot of people thought he was absolutely nuts, kind of one of these crazy inventor types. And so I had him on my show thinking he was an interesting, crazy inventor type. And then I invited him to be on my show just before he launched his crowdfunding campaign. He launched his crowdfunding campaign, and he set the record at that point for the most donations anybody had ever raised ever. He got almost $50,000, 50,000 people pledging to his campaign. Very exciting, raised over $2.2 million. And there's like serious momentum behind solar roadways now. I mean, it's very exciting to think about the potential of that. And I used to get excited to think about electric cars that drive themselves on solar roadways. Very cool stuff. Anyway, thank you very much for your time today. It's a pleasure to be here. Oh, let's do you want to do the books? Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you. Very kind.
All right, we're going to have Devin stay here for a minute. We're going to give out some of his books, and we have a fishbowl out there. Jim, can you grab that real fast, the fishbowl? And we're going to go ahead and just draw for some of his books here from the audience members, all of you guys here, obviously. So we'll just grab that, and then we'll be set. And in about roughly 10 minutes or so from now, we'll go to our next speaker, who is Todd Crossland, but we're going to give some books out. As they're walking up here, I just want to give a big shout out to the Pop Shop outside the soda bar. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. I think it's definitely added to the vibe here today. Really grateful for them to be here. And by the way, they do catering, and they do that not just for places like us, but for you if you wanted to engage them. So very, very good. Thank you to the Pop Shop there. All right, so Devin. So let's see. Do you want one of us? Are you just going to hand the book out, or do you
I'll
want?
hand the book out if you want to just tell me who to give it to.
Okay, we're going to draw names here. You got to be present to win. Makes it easier. Okay. Okay, here we go. We have Joy Booth. Joy Booth.
Joy, are you here? Oh, she is.
She's in the back. Okay. The next one is Rob Coates. No, I'm sorry.
Which
Goats.
one do you want?
Goatees? Goats.
Crowdfunding?
Goats. Okay.
Money management.
Stand up, please, right there.
My favorite. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Devin right here standing up. All right, next up, we have From Nurture Lab, let's see, Lyndon
This one?
Brittner. Lyndon Brittner. Yeah? Okay, wonderful. Okay, raise your hand high once I say your name so I can see you from up here. We have Douglas Warren. Douglas here. Raise your hand, stand up all the way. Right there. Thank you, Douglas. All right, next up we have Spencer Finch. Spencer Finch in the room still? Stand up, raise your hand if you are. Okay, I don't see a hand raised or someone standing. Okay, go to the next one. Frank DeSosa. Frank DeSosa, stand up right here. All right, thank you. Frank, why don't you just go ahead and start walking towards Devin there? All right, we'll go to the next one as well. Okay, we have Melody Saunders Brenna. Just go ahead and walk over towards Devin. Okay, right here behind you, Devin. Thank you. All right, next up we have Amanda Armstrong. All right, thank you. Okay, let's see if I can read this. I'm not sure who this is. Oh, here we go. I have Alan Flint. Alan Flint. Oh, right over there. Stage left. All right, here's Tammy Paxton. Tammy Paxton. Way at the back. Could you by chance just walk this way a little bit towards Devin? Is that okay? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. Next up, we have Jen Francis. She still here? Awesome. Right in the back there, too. Devin, how many do we have left?
I have 4 left.
4 left. 4 more.
Are there 4 left that didn't get one? Okay, I guess there are still some people who want one.
All right. Next up, we have Chris, I think Ayala. Avala? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Great. 3 more. We have Brian Tucker. Brian Tucker. So it
Brian
sounds like
Tucker?
we have 2 left now, right?
Oh, that was you? Okay. Okay, so we have one more.
One more.
One
Okay,
more.
one more. Okay, good thing I didn't get ahead of ourselves. So
Okay.
Last one. I'm holding right here. Rebecca Otsuka. Right in the back there. All right. Okay, and that's the last one. Thank you so much, Devin. 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 Thank you so much.